I have a feeling, and it's not just me, I mean, you can read it elsewhere, that there's a sort of new platform war taking place or beginning or underway. I understand you have this idea about the Gang of Four. Can you talk about that?
It just seems to me that if you look at the industry as a whole, that there are 4 companies which are exploiting platform strategies, I think, very well. Obviously, one of them, in my view, is Google. The other 3 being Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. Each of them is a consumer brand that provides something that you can't do otherwise. And what's different now is that these are global companies with reach and economics that 10 years ago or 20 years ago one company had. So the question is fundamentally, can each of the companies that I named maintain the excellence, literally the product excellence that's required as the technology moves forward?
Why much of the news coming out of Google has to do with social, though, and social competition with Facebook? I mean, this +1 that's going to be announced tomorrow, a lot of them look like chase-ups to Facebook.
Well, Facebook's done a number of things which I admire. And if you go back in the things that I've worked on, for years I said that in the internet we missed something, which was identity. Each of the companies that I mentioned have managed to use very modern concept of computer science and very, very, very aggressive scaling approaches to get large fairly quickly in the area that they're focused on.
You described Google as a company primarily about search and advertising a few minutes ago.
The reality is that music is fundamental now from a entertainment, from a branding, from an experiential level on all of these devices. We have been attempting to convince the music industry to support a subscription model around cloud-based services, and we've not been able to come to terms.
What has been the problem in terms of dealing with the entertainment industry? Because it's always seemed there's lots of efforts, they don't go very far.
Fundamentally, you're taking scarcity models and moving them to ubiquity models. And so you have to go from a strategy where you sort of charge a lot for a small number of copies to charging a little in various other ways for a large number of copies. And you also have the disintermediation possible that is now possible for people bypassing studios and going directly to digital rights, and you have this huge piracy issue.
Should we all in this room and people watching this, and really everybody, be comfortable that you and the people around you know so much about us?
The simple answer about privacy, which I think is really the question that you're asking, is that Google will remain a place where you can do anonymous searches. We don't know anything about you. And we're very committed to having you have control over the information we have about you. From our perspective, the ultimate answer is transparency. We tell people what we know, and we give them the choice of getting it deleted.
So he called it a probe in your pocket, and I said, well, now how do you know this, Steve Jobs? And he said, oh, we could do that too, but we don't have a search engine to suck it back into. And he calls it the Borg or something like that.
So to be very clear, we don't do that.
Yes.
Yes. The first is there's an opt-in for using that information if you use our various products which do social things, Latitude and a couple of other things like that. You have to explicitly choose that. There is a certain amount of information that goes back to Google, which is anonymized, and we do not store it. So the answer is it's never used against search. What else could we do besides just inform people of what people are doing? We require that.
You could curate and say, you know what, you're a game. You don't need to use this guy's phone book.
Well, for one thing, games probably need to use phone books because that's how people do multiplayer games.
Fine, it's just an example.
But we've made a decision not to curate.
I know you have.
We've made a decision to stay focused on open platforms. In order to speed the questions up, right, okay. I'm extremely happy working at Google.
Okay, so you imagine staying there for, you were saying earlier, 30 years or something like that?
A long time.
A long time. I mean, till death? What's the...
I'd say after death, if they would put the coffin in the...
You're going to be there until after death, which is an interesting career path.
And then they're going to stuff you and put you right out front. You know they will.
Right, basically, in 100 years, we've gone from the average person having access to almost no information to the average person in the world having access to all the world's information. Right? To be part of that for all of us in the room is fundamental. If you imagine, for example, what the perfectly executing evil dictator would do with all this technology, complete supervision, complete tracking, and so forth, and then you imagine what the dissident in that society would do using the very best encryption tools and so forth, unfortunately, you conclude that exactly the same tools are the ones that would be used by terrorists against an open society.
But something's happening, right? There is a kind of consumerization of IT in big organizations.
The extraordinary thing that has occurred in the last 4 or 5 years is that you can see computer science now solving real consumer problems. And I've argued, at least to some people, that what you're seeing is the death of IT as we know it.
If you were a developer, what's your third choice?
Well, many people do not have a third choice because because of the closed nature of the iOS and Objective-C sort of architecture of Apple. So the effect of this is that the third platform, there's not enough resources really to develop for that, and that tends to favor the two leaders, I think.
But if you had to pick a third, would it be the Nokia Microsoft?
You would pick based on the market.
Is your basic algorithmic approach, which was so successful and so different from everybody else in PageRank, still the right way to go? Or is there some opportunity for somebody to come in and do to you what you did to Alta Vista?
On a search engine basis, we make hundreds of improvements per quarter that you don't see. And we're working very, very hard to first make universal search, which is all, merging the answers for text and video and so forth, be much more accurate to try to give you a better answer. But the other thing that we're doing that's more strategic is we're trying to move from answers that are link-based to answers that are algorithmically based, where we can actually compute the right answer. And we now have enough artificial intelligence technology and enough scale and so forth that we can, for example, literally compute the right answer.
What is your job number one going over the next year for Google in your external? And also, will Larry ever come out of the cave, or is it just you?
I think Larry is pretty busy sitting in his office every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., going through product reviews, so he'll have to decide what he wants to do there. I'm actually most concerned about what's happening to the internet as a whole. I'm very concerned that the sum of the economic interests, the reach of the internet, the investment, all that kind of stuff, will ultimately lead to a balkanization of the internet. And as the internet becomes more controversial, as the lack of harmony between different laws with respect to privacy, publicity, access to information, I'm very concerned that we'll end up with an internet per country.
The Chrome books and the Chrome OS, you have Android, you have Chrome, and so how does the consumer understand the distinction?
Well, the consumer doesn't understand anything that we just said. What they understand is that they have applications of one kind that they download for an iPhone. They have a different store that they download different apps for the Android phone. And then in the web, they can download apps in that emergent market, and it's behind the other two they'll know them as apps, but they're fundamentally HTML5. Another way to think about it is things which are primarily web resident are likely to be the most open, most exhaustive in terms of choice, and that's what the web is all about. I should put a plug in for the Chrome browser. If you're concerned about security, you should use the Chrome browser. The Chrome browser is on the order of 15% of browsers now and is gaining share fairly dramatically because it's just faster and more powerful and much less likely to get you in trouble.
And what else should you do if you're concerned about security?
Well, you could also use a Mac over a PC, speaking as a proud former board member of Apple, because the viruses that are present on the PC are not likely to affect you as much on a Mac.